Welcome to this project on getting started with Power BI Desktop. My name is Amit and I'll be your guide for this project. In this project, we will learn the basics of using the Power BI Desktop application in a hands on, practical manner. Power BI Desktop is a free business intelligence application from Microsoft that lets you load, transform, and visualize data. You can think of Power BI as a more visual version of something like Microsoft Excel. You can create interactive reports and dashboards with it quite easily and quickly. Power BI has Pro and Premium versions as well, and they're both paid. But the free version that we are using, which is called Power BI Desktop, is good enough to get started with Power BI and understand some of the core features of the software. In this project, we will get started with Power BI Desktop and learn some of the basics by importing, transforming, and visualizing a dataset on credit card defaults. This dataset comes from UCI Machine Learning Dataset Repository. However, I have added a new column to the original dataset with some fake geolocation information for various US states. This is just to show you an example of visualizing geolocation data in Power BI in one of the tasks in this project. By the end of the project, we are going to create the report that you see in my recording. The report is not just visually appealing, it is interactive too. For example, if I clicked on a particular US state, say California, then the visualization updates all of the other plots as well in real time and shows us data for that particular state. What's even more amazing is that we will be able to achieve this result from raw data in less than 1 hour. So I hope you're eager to get started. Let's continue to the next task and talk a little bit about the RHYME interface, and then we can jump into our hands on project. Before we get started with the actual project, let me quickly introduce you to the RHYME interface. When this project starts, you will see two windows on your screen. The narrow window on the right hand side is this recorded video. You will find a play bar at the bottom of this video with which you can pause and resume it. You can also change the playback speed. On the left hand side, you will see a bigger window. This is your cloud desktop. The cool thing about the RHYME platform is that you will be able to watch the instructions on the right hand side and follow along in your own cloud desktop at the same time on the left hand side. The cloud desktop comes with the software we will need in this project, which is the Power BI desktop software. So you don't have to worry about downloading or installing anything, and you can just focus on learning. If during the project you have any questions or if you face any issues, please feel free to ask for help in the discussion forum on the Coursera page of this course. All right, so hopefully you're excited to create this dashboard in Power BI Desktop. Let's get started in the next task. Welcome back. In this task, we are going to import the data that we will be working with. When the Cloud Desktop launches, you will see this welcome screen. And if you have a Power BI account, you can sign in. Otherwise, you can just close this window. This is the default view, which is called the report view, which will open when you log into Power BI for the first time. And there is also a data view and a model view. In this project, we are not going to use the model view, but we will use the data view and the report view as well. So to get started, let's import our data. Click on the Get Data button, or you can click on the drop-down menu to select the type of file that you're importing. We are using text/CSV. So the CSV file that we have is on desktop data folder in your cloud desktop. Let's click on it and open it. You will see another pop-up where Power BI will show you the data that you're trying to import. So it will give you a glimpse of it essentially. And at this point, if you want, you can either transform it or load it as is. So we are going to load it for now, and we will look at transformation of this data a little later. Depending on the size of the data set, it may take a few seconds or maybe more for Power BI to import the data. Once the importing is complete, you will see a fields column populated on the extreme right hand side. It shows you a table, data, and then a variety of fields called column 1, 2, 3, and so on. So this is not very descriptive. So let's take a look at our data by going to the data view and then clicking on the data table. So it should load by default, and you will see a bunch of these numbers and a bunch of these columns. Now, the problem right now is that even though we have this data, there are no descriptors and we don't really understand what these columns mean. In the original data, there are actually descriptors, but they're not being used here as column names. So that's something that we will need to fix so that we can understand this data better. So let's see how to do that in the next task. Welcome back. So the dataset that we're working with comes from UCI Machine Learning repository. And this is a dataset of credit card defaults that happened in Taiwan back in 2005. And I should point out that the last column that you see, which has US states mentioned in it, this is a completely made up column and it has been populated just pretty much randomly. So this doesn't actually mean anything in with respect to rest of the data, but this is added just to show you an example of geolocation visualization later on in the project. All right, now for rest of the columns, these are just numbers and we don't really understand what they mean because the column names are pretty meaningless to us. However, in the original dataset, we do have column names which are more descriptive, and we can take a look at the original data by clicking on this transform data button. If you don't see this, make sure that you're on the home tab because sometimes by default you may be on the table tools. So go back to your home tab and then you will see the transform data button and you can click on it to open the transform data window. In this window, if you see the size is too small, you can always expand it. And you will see that in the raw data set, which is presented to us without any of the cleaning that Power BI does on its own, we do see these descriptive names. So column 1 is actually ID of the customer. And then we have column 2, which is limit balance. And then the gender or sex, their education level, marriage, and so on. So these column names would be much better than x1, x2, or then column 2, column 3, and so on. So we should transform our data so that we can use the row 2 as our column name for this table. In order to do that, you need to find a couple of buttons here. So look for this option which says reduce rows. And if I click on it, it will say, it will give you an option to remove rows. And if I click on that, it will show you an option to remove top rows. And when you click on that, it will ask you how many rows you want to remove. And we just want to remove one because the only row we are trying to remove is this x1, x2, x3 row. Click OK, and you will see that that row will disappear. Now, our descriptive names are the first row, but they're still not being used as column names. So let's find this other option which says use first row as headers. Click on it, and now you will see that the column name becomes ID for the first column, limit balance for the second one, sex for the third one, and so on. So now our column names are a lot more descriptive, and we can start to make some sense of this data. Towards the end, you will see two columns. This is called default payment next month, and I will double click on it to rename it to simply default. So this indicates whether there was a default or not from each of the customers in this data set. So in this table, each row represents a customer, and then we have uh, a variety of information on that customer, including whether they defaulted or not. So you can rename it to default or maybe defaulted to make it more descriptive. And the last column that I added just to have some geolocation data in this table um, has one of the state names. So that doesn't make sense. Let's remove that, replace that with state. Okay, so this is looking much better now. Now, in order to save this change and in order to commit the changes to your data, you will have to click on close and apply. And then your table in the data view will be updated. As you can see, it's applying query changes. And once these are applied, you will see the descriptive column names here as well as in the fields here. Okay, so now this has started to make more sense. Great. So hopefully you've been able to follow along so far. And if not, please feel free to pause my recording and catch up. And I'll see you in the next task. And we will start to understand this data a little bit better. Welcome back. In this task, we will continue to work on transforming our data to make it more descriptive and understandable. And we will go to the transform data option and open our transform window. So the first column is pretty self-explanatory. This is the ID of the client that each row belongs to one client essentially. And limit balance simply indicates the amount of credit that was given to them. Then we have the sex column, which basically indicates the gender. And as per the description given in the original repository, value 1 here represents male, and a value 2 in this column represents female. So 1 and 2 is okay, but in our report, it's not going to look very nice. It's not going to look very descriptive. So we might want to change it to male and female. And if there is any other value other than 1 and 2, then maybe that could be assigned as unknown. So in order to replace the values, go to the replace values option. And now values to find is 1, and we want to replace it with male. However, you will see this error, and it will not actually let you click on the OK button to replace the values. And that's because this is a whole number data type. And that's fine for 1 and 2, but it wouldn't work for text information that we want to replace these values with. So we will have to change the data type from whole number to text. And now if I click on replace values and replace 1 with male. Click on OK. There we go. And then again replace values and replace to with email. So there we go. So now we have all the values in all the rows changed to male female as opposed to 1 and 2. And this makes more sense to me. It is more descriptive. It will look better in our visuals in the final report. Now, similarly, you can take a look at education, marriage, and change those to uh, more descriptive names as well, because these are categorical columns, and having 1, 2, 3 is fine, but for our report, it will not make a lot of sense. So we can again go ahead and replace the values, but there is actually a another way which might be easier in some situations. So let's take a look at that as well. So what we will do is we will go to add column and we will create a conditional column. And you will have to give it a name, of course. So I'm going to call it education level. So essentially, I'm trying to keep it similar to uh, education, but I think education level is uh, a good name for it. And we're going to choose the column name education. And if education equals value 1, then the output will be whatever 1 means in this column and so on. So if we take a look at the UCI machine learning repository for the original data set, we will see that 1, 2, 3, 4 mean different things, like the client is a graduate or they have an undergraduate degree and so on. So if the value is 1, then we want the output to be graduate. And then we will add another condition again for education. So if this is equal to 2, then they have a university degree or they have an undergraduate degree. And if the education is equal to 3, then they have a high school diploma. And in a catch-all else, we can then write else it's others or unknown. We don't really know. So let's just call it unknown. We don't know if they have a postgraduate degree or undergraduate degree or what's their exact education level. All right. So let's click on OK. So now we see that a new column has been created which says education level, and we have values like undergraduate, graduate, high school, or unknown based on the logic that we just talked about. Now, it doesn't mean that your original column is completely replaced. That still exists. You can see the education column still there. And if you want, you can just right click on it and remove it, because we have we're not going to use that. We have replaced the values and essentially created a new column to reflect education level. Now, we have a column for marriage as well. And again, this is categorical data. So we have 1 for married, 2 for single, and 3 for others or unknown. So we can do something similar to what we just did. And we can add a conditional column. And this time, uh, let's just call it marital status, and the column name is marriage. If it is equal to 1, then the client is married, and if it is equal to 2, and I should point out that you can change the operators here, of course, but for us, we just want the equal to operator. So if it is equal to 2, they are single, else we don't really know. So it could be unknown. So there we go. Column for marital status has been created. And again, we probably don't need the uh, column marriage anymore. So we can simply right click on it and remove it. There we go. All right. So hopefully you've been able to follow along so far, and you've created these two new columns, which are more descriptive. Values are more meaningful to us. And let's continue on to the next task and start to finally work on our visualization of this data. Welcome back. So, before we apply our changes and go back to our uh, data or report view, I just wanted to point out that if you wanted to undo any of the changes that you have done, any of the transformations that you have done, you can take a look at the applied steps. This is essentially the history of whatever you have done in transformation, and you can undo any of these by removing them from here. Okay, so let's go back to our home tab and close and apply these changes. And in our data view, we will see that sex, education, and marital status would have changed. And there we go. So sex now has female and male uh, values instead. And on the right hand side, the new columns that we have created for education level and marital status are also present. Great. So this is as expected. So now we can go to our report view and start to actually look at how to visualize some of this information to create our report. Now, in order to create a bit more space on my screen, I will get rid of the filter tab, but we will keep the fields and visualizations as is for now, and we are not going to collapse them. Now, to get started with visualizing any of the columns, all you have to do is simply select it. So, for example, you just want to see how many people have defaulted. So, just select that, and as soon as you do that, a plot will automatically be created, which will show you how many people have defaulted. Now, right now, it's pretty bland because it shows you just one information here and essentially just the count of how many people have defaulted. But we can actually add more information to access and make this uh, m- more interesting for us. So, what do I mean by that? For example, if you wanted to see what was the distribution of number of defaults with respect to age, then all you have to do is drag and drop age in axis, and that will be set as your x-axis, and you will see the defaults that are happening across ages and how they are spread out. So you can see there are more number of defaults happening uh, with younger clients as compared to older clients, and that may be because there are more number of clients in this age, or there could be other reasons, but at least you can visually represent that distribution. All right, and you can resize any of these plots as you see fit, or you can use the default size given from Power BI. If you want to look at any plot in detail and you want to zoom into it, you can click on this button right here, which which will focus on that plot itself, and it will show you on the entire report page. All right. So this is how easy it is to create visualizations in Power BI. Now we can go back to our full report. On the right hand side, you have a variety of visualizations that you can try with each of your plot. Now, not each type of visualization will make sense for each type of plot, but feel free to experiment with it and see what works. For example, in this case, a line chart might not be a bad idea. So if I click on it, this plot will be converted to a line chart. Now we can make it even more interesting and even more descriptive by using legend as well. So right now what this plot says is what is the distribution of default uh, across age. So how many total defaults are happening across various ages. Yeah. So we can now say, okay, can we also see that distribution across age as well as across gender in the same plot? So all we have to do is go to our sex column and drag and drop it in legend. And now that actually creates a more interesting plot here. And if I zoom into it by going to the focus mode, you can see that the distribution across male and female is pretty much the same for all ages except for when they are younger than 30, in which case there are more defaults happening in total with with female clients. And again, that doesn't mean that female clients are more likely to commit defaults, but it's just the total number of defaults are more, because there could be other explanations like they have more female clients who are credit card holders. So let's go back to our report and continue to work on our visualization. But hopefully, with this small plot, you were able to get some insight on how easy it is to create these kind of reports with Power BI. Now, we'll add more and also take a look at uh, more customization as well as interactivity in these visuals. Welcome back. If you wanted to remove any of the plots on your report, you can click on this drop down menu and you will find the option to remove. There we go. So now let's start creating our report from scratch again. And this time, let's start with the number of defaulted. So I'll select it and a plot will be created automatically. And we will look at the distribution across education level. So I'll select education level and drop it to axis. And now if I zoom into this, I will see that the distribution of defaults happening across undergraduate degree holders, graduate degree holders, and so on. And just like last time, we can also uh, use a legend. So we can use uh, gender or sex, drop it to legend, and that will show us the distribution across education level and the sex as well. And you can see the legend is printed out here. All right, let's go back to the report. Now I'm going to do something similar with defaulted number of defaults across age, which we did last time. So I will deselect this report by clicking anywhere in the canvas. And now if I select defaulted, it will create another plot. And I'll drag and drop age to the axis column, and this will create the age axis and show us the distribution of defaults across age. And again, I will use sex and drop it in legend to create the distribution for both female and male. Now it's hard to read here, but that's okay. You can always zoom in and look at the distribution. So there we go. We can see the legend uh, female and male. Now I think it's better to represent this plot in a line plot. So let's select that. This looks a little better to me. And we can drag and move these plots around and place them wherever in the canvas. There we go. And if you think they're too small, you can, of course, zoom in or you can stretch them a little bit. And let me make this the same size as the previous one. There we go. Okay, so cool. So we have part of our report done, and it may be nice to actually just see the distribution across gender separately as well. So let's deselect any plot by clicking on the canvas uh, elsewhere, as in outside of these plots, and click on defaulted again. And this time I'm just going to drop the sex to access, and it will show me the total number of defaults for female and male. Now, when we use the sex data on this line plot, or when we display defaulted by education level, we see this legend, and the color is different for female and male. And it will be nice to do that here as well. So you could think that just dragging and dropping sex to legend as well will solve it, and that is of course going to work as we have seen before. But what you could also do is customize the colors manually. So I'm going to get rid of the legend, and this is our original plot. And to customize the colors manually, I'm going to go to this paint roller, and I'll take a look at data colors and click on show all. And now I see colors for female and male categories. And for male, I'm going to select the sort of purplish color that the plot is using by default. So this one. Oops. Yeah. And that does a similar job, right? So you could customize the visuals by going to this paint roller. And there are a lot of other options like changing the titles or aligning the titles and so on. So, for example, if you want to change the title, you could simply type it out here. And if you want to align them, you can change the alignment here, change the font color, and so on. Okay, so let me go back to the fields. Now, one interesting thing about Power BI visualization is if you select any of the plots, and if you select any legend or category from any of these plots, it will update rest of them and display the information for the category that you have selected. So in this case, I selected male from this plot, but it highlighted that information in the education level plot as well as in the age plot as well. And if I click on it again, then it will be deselected, and I will see the entire information. So this feature will just help you dig into your data a bit more, a bit more intelligently, so that you're able to do data analysis in a more comprehensive manner. Okay, so hopefully you understand creating plots as well as customizing with the paint roller. There are a lot of options here. Depending on the visualization, you can dig more into the customization part. But we will continue to create our report and move on to the next task. And we will now take a look at the geolocation data in our data set as well. Welcome back. So in this task, we're going to take a look at visualizing the geolocation data that we have in our data set. And even though it's fake data, which was created by me and it's not part of the original data set, it will serve as a decent example. So if I just go to our fields and select state, a map visual is automatically added, and you can see these blue dots essentially represent different states. But this doesn't look very cool. And if I select the filled map, this makes more sense to me because, we just have states and we don't have uh, longitude and latitude for location, just the name of the state. But there's actually an even better option. So I'm going to get rid of this. And at the time of recording this project, this new option is not available in visualizations. But if you go to File, Options and Settings, Options, and go to Preview Features, you will find a shape map visual. And just select that, press OK. And this feature requires a restart, and that's OK too. So right now we wouldn't see it here, but we will need to restart Power BI. And in that case, we will have to save our work as well. So that's fine. Let's just go to File and save it. And I'm going to save it on desktop and give it name Credit Card Defaults. Okay. And now we will close Power BI and double click on the file that we just saved to launch it again. All right. And once the project is loaded, you will see a shape map option, which wasn't there before. So let's click on it. And there we go. A blank shape map is added. And this time we started by loading the visualization first. And then we can just drag and drop state column to location. And that will populate your shape map. And this looks much better compared to rest of the map visualizations we saw. And we can also change the color saturation depending on the number of items we have for each of these maps, or depending on defaulted if you want. So let's drag and drop default to color saturation. And now you will see that the color of different states is now different. And if there are more defaults from a particular state, uh, the color is darker. For example, for Florida. And if the number of defaults is less from a particular state, then the color is lighter. So, for example, Colorado. Okay, so I'm going to drag and drop this on the top side here. So let's select this. So on the top right side, and I will expand it a little more. There we go. Looks good. And now if you select on a particular state, for example, Florida, rest of the map, rest of the report will automatically update as well. And you will be able to see uh, the plots for the state of Florida. All right. So, congratulations on making this far. We will continue to work on this report. We don't have a lot of elements left. So, in the next task, we will try to finish most, if not all, of the report. In this task, we will first add another plot, which will show us the defaulted number of defaults on credit cards against marital status. So let's take a look at that distribution as well. So let's click on defaulted and it will create a basic plot, and then we will drag and drop the marital status to access. So there we go. We have single, married, and unknown. And then we will also take a look at the categories male and female. So drop it on legend, and it creates a similar plot to what we did before. So if I select male, then it will update my visuals and show only males for marital status as well as for education level and so on. All right. Now, while so far we've been taking a look at the total number of defaults for any category or for any, uh, for example, the education level category, or for single or married, or for male or female categories. But a good metric to look at might also be the ratio of defaults for those categories. So, what I'm trying to say is that instead of looking at the total number of defaults, it may also make sense to take a look at the ratio of defaults happening in certain categories. And that may be a nice indicator uh, in addition to what we've seen so far as well. So, for this purpose, I'll just want to take a look at just the ratio number itself, and we will not plot it as such. So, what I want is have just a card. So, you can go to your visualizations and find card, and you can drag and drop some value here. So, say defaulted, and it will show you that value. So similarly, we want to take a look at the ratio and not at the total value. And whenever you use any column values in a field, you actually get the option to uh, look at the total sum or the average or distinct values and so on. So if I go to fields and drag drop, click on this drag drop icon, I will see that I can change it from the default sum, which is what we've been looking at so far for all of the plots, to average or minimum or maximum or distinct counts and so on. So in this case, we are talking about the ratio. So we are essentially talking about the average. And now we can see that there are about 20%, 22% clients in total which are defaulting. And this is a nice indicator to have, because if I look at, say, just the female clients, I know the total number of defaults is pretty high, but the ratio of defaults is actually lower than average. And if I take a look at male clients, then even though the total number of defaults is clearly less, the average or the ratio of defaulters is higher. So about 24% of these clients are defaulting. So this could be an interesting value to look at, but it's pretty small. We don't need so much space for to display this ratio. So I'm going to make it slightly smaller, maybe something like this, and also add a title to this. So let's select it and go to the paint roller, and I will switch on the title and give it a title, defaulted ratio. All right. And well, that's pretty much it. If you want, you can further customize it using the features that you have in your paint roller. But this is descriptive enough. I think it makes sense. It's pretty obvious what this is. And so you can also select, various states and take a look at the defaulted ratio for those states. So some will have higher value for this than others. And finally, it'll be nice to be able to slice our data uh, by education level, let's say, for any of these plots, which we can already do. So we can look at, you know, graduates and slice our data like that. But uh, if we have a slicer separately, it will give us one additional option to dig deeper into this data analysis by selecting education level and then selecting probably marital status or sex or so on further. So uh, this can be a pretty useful idea. And I'm going to add a slicer by going to our visualization, and you have a slicer right here. Let's click on it. Okay, now I changed the first visualization to the slicer, and I did not actually mean to do that. So I'll just press Control Z to undo it. And I actually meant to deselect it. So I'll click elsewhere in the canvas and then select the slicer. So there we go. Now the slicer doesn't have any fields yet, and we want to set education level. And here we see these 4 education levels in our slicer. And what this is going to do is give us an added dimension uh, to look at across all our plots. And what I mean by that is right now, because of the way the categorical information for sex is displayed here, I have to select either on undergraduate female or undergraduate male, but there is no way for me to look at both of them. But with the slicer option, I can do that. So if I select undergraduate, then all the maps are updated and they will show me just the undergraduate uh, degree holders information. And then you can have multiple slicers, and then you can have multiple uh, options even from here. For example, you want to look at undergraduate degree holders uh, who are also married and who are females. So if you select on that, then that data will be reflected in all of your plots. And additionally, or alternatively, you can also have another slicer for, say, marital status. So I'm going to deselect the slicer, add another slicer, and drag and drop the marital status here. So now if I take a look at, say, undergraduate degree holders who are married, then the plot will update to show me just that information. And then you can see some interesting insights. For example, for undergraduate degree holders who are married, you can see that the peak and defaulters happen at different ages in males and females. And you can see a variety of these kind of interesting insights. All right. So hopefully this was interesting for you, and hopefully you learned the basics of using Power BI to ingest as well as to visualize your data. And we also looked at some transformation options for our data. And now you can also save and share this report uh, on the Power BI platform itself by clicking on this publish button. But for that, you will need to log into Power BI and you will need an account on Power BI. There is a free trial that you can use, but in general, you will have to use paid accounts for the most part, at least. But these reports can also be shared by simply saving them. So I'm just going to save it. And you can now uh, simply send the saved Power BI file to your colleagues, and they can then load that file into Power BI desktop without having to go through the trouble of loading the data, and just take a look at the cool and interesting um, visualizations that you've created for them to analyze the data. All right. Congratulations again on finishing this project. And I hope you had fun doing this, and I hope you learned something valuable. I hope to see you on more RHYME projects in future. And thank you for participating.